Well, here we are on the River Severn at the absolutely delightful village of Hampton Load. A river full of fish and absolutely teeming with wildlife. You can hear the ducks in the background, see field fares in the field there. Absolutely an incredible day to go fishing. Very frosty, so we've had a very, very hard frost through the night. But what I'm going to show you today is a method of catching chub that is the easiest way of fishing of all. Easy baits to use, easy baits to make, simple rigs, and we're going to catch some fish that you'll be able to catch just as easy as I do. Okay, let's go and bait some swims and catch some fish. Well, this is a classic chub swim, and what I'd like to say right from the start is, doesn't matter about the rods, the reels, the rigs, the bait, whatever. The first thing you need to do is understand the species, and the species today is chub, and we need to know where they live, where they will feed, because that's where we're going to try and catch them. Now you can see out there, there's the main flow. They probably won't be in there, they'll probably be on the inside of that, waiting for food particles to come down the river, and as the particles come down they can just drift into the flow and pick those particles up. There might be flies, there may be bread, what somebody's thrown in for the ducks or whatever, all sorts of things coming down the river, especially when the river rises in flood. Various creatures, whether it be slugs or whatever, may be washed into the river. They'll be washed down that centre flow, and those fish will just be not wasting energy, they'll just be in the slack moving out there, and that's where we're going to fish. We're going to fish on that lovely crease between calm water and flowing water where the food will be. That's where the chub will be. And chub love snags. They really love snags. Anglers don't like snags, but chub love them. So we're not going to fish right in the snag, but if you look, there's a tree. I guarantee there's going to be a few chub under there. So what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to feed a few pieces of bread. I don't put lots of mash in. I don't throw bread mash with a great big cloud of white going down into the swim. I think that frightens the big fish. So what I do is I get particles, small particles of flake, and I don't go right into the swim to throw it in. I come right back here and I get the bread flake, squeeze it into a ball, because it will come out into the flake when it sinks. And then what I do then is back from the river, I shoot it onto that crease, let it sink into the swim, down it goes. And I'm going to do that in about 4 to 5 pegs, and then I'm going to let it rest. And when I let it rest, those fish will be confidently feeding. So this will be the last swim I fish, although it's the first swim I'm baiting up. Okay? Out we go. I'll probably put 4 to 5 pieces. Then I'll come back in half an hour while I'm fishing another peg. There you go. I'll put some right on the crease, some in close. I don't know where those fish are. I just need one piece of bread to find a chub there, and I guarantee they'll be searching the whole area. And the one they'll pick up next will be the one with my hook in. Well, if there was a chub swim made in heaven, this is the one. It's the most perfect chub swim you could ever see. In shallow water, when the river's really, really low, there's a bit of a sandbank there and a deep hole there where the chub, at this time of year when it gets cold and frosty like that, just drop into there, and those chub will be in that deeper water. But also look at that fantastic snag down there. That hole's a huge shoal of chub, and what we're going to try and do, we'll gradually work down to it. We'll put the flake in, we'll try and draw those chub up from that snag, and we'll catch fish at the head of it, not sling it straight into the snag, which has got a chance of losing them. What we're going to try and do is attract those fish up in that flow. There's a lovely steady flow coming down there, just hitting that trees, bringing all the food particles down there. So as I put the flake in, little lumps of cheese in there, what's going to happen, I'm going to leave it for probably half an hour after I've baited up, go and fish one of those swims that I've already baited up, leave those chub, get onto that crust, smell that cheese, get confident, and then hopefully when I come back they'll be feeding, first chuck in, round with a quiver tip. Just note, I'm leaving most of my kit on top of the bank, well away from the peg, because at 19 stone, I'm going to make enough noise anyway without extra weight. So instead of going down there like a charging big Spanish bull, I'm probably going down, charging down there like a miniature bull actually, but I'm going to make as little as noise as possible, take minimum gear as possible, get down there, put the bait in and see if we can get a chub straight away. The amount of times that I've come into a swim that I've prepared for an hour. Remember, these are not the first particles of flake or cheese they've seen. For the last hour, I've been putting those baits in and those chub have been feeding on them. They've been coming out the slack water slightly into that crease of flow, picking them up, getting more confident by the minute. Hopefully the bigger fish are now so confident they're starting to bully the small fish out. And you know, I'm fishing for a bigger fish now after an hour, whereas sometimes when you cast a bait in, sometimes the smaller fish are the first to come. Well, I'm not fishing that situation, am I? I'm an hour into the swim, it's my first cast, but I've actually been fishing an hour. Those fish have been feeding for an hour. And very often that first cast, within 5 minutes, just a little tap on the tip. Lovely thing about chub is, they normally say hello. They normally go, hello, I'm here, and then you look at your tip and then wallop it round it goes. Rarely does it go out round right away. What it does is always, chub seem to come up and go, hello, are you ready? Woof, and away you go. So this is the first cast of the day. Let's see if we can get one. What I tend to do with the crust is imagine that it's getting softer all the time, so it doesn't last that long. Probably the longest I'll leave it out is probably 10 minutes at a time. So what I'm doing is I'll chuck it out. If I want to move it round in the flow, I use a bigger piece of crust because that's more resistance, and as I hold it up, the flow will bring it round. If I don't want it to move so much, then I use a smaller piece of crust, which is less resistance, so the flow won't pick it up. But within 10 minutes, what I'll do is strike that off, bring it in, put a new piece on, chuck it out into the flow, bring it round, out of the flow, into that slight slack, and then probably after about a minute, I just lift it up and let it just come round a bit farther. I'm just imagining a chub sitting by the side of that crust, thinking, shall I, shan't I, shall I, shan't I? And just as I move it, oops, I think I will. He's grabbed it. What I'll tend to do is I'll fish probably a little bit short of where I think that I'll probably have most of my fish. Just short. If I can take a bonus fish, imagine those fish coming up from that area I think they are, and I take one from the point of the shoal. And hopefully I can take a couple off the point of the shoal, those front runners first, before I actually go down the swim a little bit as they drop back. The last thing you want to do is imagine like those herd of sheep over there. If you wanted to catch one, you wouldn't sling it to the back of the flock to try and pull one through. What you do is try to get that front one not scared in the morning. It's the same with these fish, just like sheep. You've got that shoal. If you can take one off the front, you're not scared in the rest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cast right to the back, you might catch one, but you've got to bring him all the way through. Could ruin the day. I've been fishing for chub since I was about 16 or 17 years of age. I remember the first one I caught just down the river from here at Highley on a piece of cheese. And the lovely thing about chub is they eat everything. You can catch them on maggots, you can catch them on casters, bread, cheese, slugs, worms, spinners, rubber lures. They'll eat anything. They're predators. When they get really big, like 7s, 8s and 9s, they go above that food chain sometimes of bread and cheese and worms, and they'll become almost pike and zander-like and eat lots of fry and fish. And many anglers will fish with sprats and tiny lumps of fish for them. So they're, you know, incredibly versatile for what they'll eat. And they're, you know, one of the few fish that I would fish for on a day like this. You know, we've had 4 or 5 degrees, minus 4 or 5 degrees in the night, a hard frost, beautiful morning. You know, if you're thinking about barbel or you're thinking about carp, things like that, then, you know, you really could be struggling. But, you know, the old chub, it might be hard and we might only get a couple of fish, but you can almost guarantee that even on the coldest of days, on the bread or the cheese, you're going to get 1 or 2 pulls. You might get the window sometime through the day. There might be a window of half an hour where it's unbelievable. You've struggled for a bite, then in half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, you'll have 2 or 3 fish, and then it dies again. That's the short window those fish have fed in these conditions. But make no bones about it, if there's a fish that's going to feed today, it will be a chub, and hopefully a big one. I'm really worried at the moment about in the first swim I had a few indications that could have been fish hitting the line, you know, could have been chub, or could have been small roach hitting the crust, just picking at the crust. But since that first swim, since I've moved, I haven't had any indications at all. So, you know, the river's a little bit dead at the moment, but that's very typical of winter, you know, that's what can happen. But, you know, I've got to do something about it, and as I say, I think I shall move into the trees. But this is a very good swim, holds some nice fish, so I'm reluctantly wanting to move from here, because one take from here could be that 5 or 6 pounder. But I'm having no indications at all, so there's no fish moving around. Even if they don't hit the crust, even if they know you're there, even if they know you're scared, you sometimes get fish and they just move, hit the line, and you get that small indication that keeps you in the swim. If I get indications, I'll stop in the swim, because there's fish in, and eventually it's not if you're going to get the chub, it's only when you're going to get a chub. This has got to be the simplest rig that was ever invented. You put on a few shots, so you're just about holding the current. You don't want to hold it too hard, you want to be able to lift those shot so he comes round in the current, so he can go under the snags and into the trees. A piece of crust on a decent size hook, something like a size 6 or size 8. And what will happen, that will just pop up off the bottom. If you look at a chub, it's not really a bottom feeder. Of course, it will pick up bottom baits, but generally it's a mid-water to surface feeding fish if you look at the shape of its mouth. So it finds that a lot easier to pick up that just popped up off the bottom like that than actually a bait line on the bottom. He just moves in, takes it. I've had so many chub on this popped up crust, whether it be on the Thames, the Windrush, the Way, the Severn, the Wye, the Ribble, all over the country I've caught on this simple rig. Very, very simple. 6 to 8 pound line minimum if you're after a big fish. A couple of shots on the line, decent size hook, a loaf of bread, and you're on for a day's fishing. The nice thing about this kind of fishing is you can bring the minimum amount of gear. A bag with your few bits and pieces in, your landing net, a seat. Some don't even bring a seat. Some people, some mates of mine will just bring a cushion, a rod and a reel, and you're away. Basic feeder reel that I think probably everyone owns, and a quiver tip rod. A fairly stout feeder rod. I wouldn't say a little quiver tip rod. I would say one that, you know, would serve as an Avon quiver tip with a nice spliced in tip around in between 2 and 4 ounce quiver tip. And that's going to give you the indication. Not too stiff. I actually like glass tips as opposed to carbon tips. They're nice and soft, so when he first plucks that chub, he doesn't feel the tip, then he gives you a nice big pull around. But basic gear, look, I've got nothing. If I want to move, up, away, I've gone. You know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I've not got a great big box and, you know, great big hodls and God knows what, you know. It's roving, it's hit and run. Great way to fish. I was talking earlier about going into the trees, and that's what I've done. Rather than open ground now and just the odd tree, what I've done is move into a coppice full of trees, all broken down trees, full of snags, and I think that's where they'll be. And sure enough, I've just cast in and I've had a little indication, and that's the first time for about 2 hours. So with a bit of luck, that might be, you know, the move we needed to do. You try this on your local river, small or large. You know, this crust popped up, it'll catch chub. If there's chub eating on the day, believe me, you'll catch them on this method. And it's the simplest method out. You know, whether you've been fishing for 10 years or whether you've been fishing for literally the first time out, you will catch fish on this. You know, anybody can put 3 shot or 2 shot onto some 8 pound line with a decent hook on and fold a bit of crust on there. Anybody can do it. With the added advantage, it's cheap, very, very cheap. I mean, you can go for a day's fishing on a loaf of bread. I use crusty bread, this type of thing. Here, that's what I've used in half a day. I just use the crust, bottom and top. I use the stuff in the middle, the flake for baiting up. Just keep rolling that up like that. And that's what I chuck in. That fluffs up when it hits the bottom. And then I just put this popped up. And that's gonna last me all afternoon now. And that's cost me probably £1.30. Not a bad day's fishing, is it? I can imagine some saying, well, I thought you'd had a fish by now. Well, there's some days when I have a fish first chuck and there's some days when I blank. I'm hoping this isn't the day I blank, but at the end of the day, I don't think fishing was meant to be easy. And to my mind, like anything in life, you know, if it comes easy, then does it mean that much? But when you've tried and you've tried to get better and you've learned more about the subject, you've learned more about the species, eventually when you do get the take, and eventually when you do reach your goal, whether that be a 3-pound chub or whether that be a 7-pound chub, if you eventually get it after a bit of effort, I think it means all that much more. It certainly does to me, sure it does you. Oh, got it, got one. Him who waits. Ha ha ha. Not a big fish, but it saved the day. Oh, it's a nice fish actually. Look at that. Ho ho ho. Look at that. Ah, my life. It's a beauty actually. It's a beauty. My life. Now that really means something, because I've tried all day, and to be honest, I was just about giving up and thinking, oops, you ain't so good as you thought, but I was wrong. I'm still brilliant. Oh, that's great. Let's weigh this beauty up. That's an hard-earned chub, believe me. But even on an hard day, the method will produce, and it has. Yeah, well over £4. I think it's £4.7, nearly £4.5. On a cold day, when we thought nothing's feeding, believe me, and I've had chub to over 7. That's given me a bigger smile on my face than the 7-pounder. Look at that. In fact, let's get it out quick and see if we can get another one. Look at that. What a beauty. You saved my day, old son. Look at that for a fish. In you go, girl. Hey, let's see if we can get another one right before the death. Well, that was the day that was. You know, quite difficult, very difficult in fact. You know, I've ended up with one fish, but I've tried my hardest, and I've learned about today. I've learned about the conditions. Something that I've tried, you know, right at the end of the day has worked, and it's made me feel good, and I've enjoyed it. And when I go home, you know, I'm gonna have a meal, maybe a glass of cider, maybe a glass of wine, maybe both, I don't know. And I'm gonna reflect on another great day on the river. Can't beat it.